as Paul gets ready to finish his letter, he starts talking about the fact that he's getting ready to return home. We know from the book of Acts, mostly, Acts chapter 20 in particular, that as he writes the letter to the Romans, he's preparing to finish his third missionary journey. He's preparing to get all the way back, take the offering, go back and visit the Jewish church in Jerusalem. So his plan originally, he said, had been to travel by boat from Corinth straight over to Jerusalem. But apparently he discovered an assassination plot. This happens a lot to Paul, people trying to kill him for the gospel that he represents. And so instead of getting on a boat, he walked at least part of the way. And as the book of Romans comes to a conclusion, in Romans chapter 16, he said, all of the churches send greetings. That's because all of those churches that he had visited throughout his journeys have now sent representatives to Corinth to join Paul with this offering. And together, all of these men are going to take the offering as a sign of generosity, as a show of unity between the Gentile churches and the Jewish church. So he lists by name person after person after person that are leaders in the churches that have now all come together in this amazing show of unity. Well, he leaves Corinth, makes his way, because he's now going over land, not over sea, he makes his way to the town of Troas. He's been in Troas before, and he's now in Troas, and it says he stays 7 days. This is in Acts chapter 20. This is the time where he preaches late into the night. Now, my guess is Paul preached late into the night more than once. This is a special time. He's up on the third floor of a building, and he is preaching. And he has preached apparently for a very long time. And a young man by the name of Eutychus is sitting in the window. It was probably a hot evening. He was tired after a long day of work. Paul was continuing, and he was talking and talking and talking, and finally Eutychus fell asleep sitting in the window. And he fell out of the window, hit the pavement outside the window, outside the building, and died. Of course, everyone rushed down. Paul said, "It's okay. He's alive." Eutychus got back up again with an incredible act of God, and they all went back, and Paul continued to preach, which is interesting for those of us who are preachers. Probably stop a little sooner before people fall out of the window. But as the book of Acts continues, Luke, as he does, just says he stopped here, then he stopped here, then he stopped here, then he stopped here. And most of these places don't have much bearing on our spiritual growth. But they're a good reminder that Luke, who wrote the book of Acts, was very careful in his research. And Luke put Paul in his historical context so we can identify that Paul took normal shipping routes. He just got on the ships and went where ships normally go as he quietly made his way back towards Jerusalem. He intentionally did not stop in Ephesus. Paul was concerned that if he stopped in Ephesus, he would stay too long, and he was in a hurry to get back to Jerusalem. So he told the leaders of Ephesus that they could meet him at a nearby town. And when he got there, all the leaders were there, and the Holy Spirit all along here has told people in these different places that Paul is going to face danger in Jerusalem. And so Paul has plenty of warning. The leaders from Ephesus repeat this, that this is not going to be safe for Paul to go to Jerusalem. And Paul himself acknowledges that it's not going to be safe. And he says, "I will not see you again." At which point there's a very difficult farewell. The Ephesians obviously love Paul deeply. Paul takes his leave and then continues on his way back to Jerusalem. Well, eventually Paul's boat stops in the port city of Caesarea. And Caesarea is the port city that people landed in when they were going to go inland to Jerusalem. So the boat gets to Caesarea, and when it gets there, Paul is met by a prophet named Agabus. And Agabus comes up to Paul with a prophecy. And he takes Paul's belt and ties his hands with them and says, Paul, God has shown me that in the same way that I have tied my hands with this belt, you too will be captured by the Romans, by the Gentiles, when you are in Jerusalem. And of course, everyone says, Paul, you can't go. God is sending prophets to warn you of the danger. You can't go. It's too dangerous. And Paul says, I have to go. God has called me to go. I know that it's dangerous. I know that God has sent warnings all along the way, but the warnings were just to tell me what was to be expected. God has told me to go anyway. So I am fully prepared to be arrested or to be persecuted. I'm prepared even to die to follow what God has called me to do. So they continue on and they head towards the city of Jerusalem. At which point, Paul, in fact, will discover that the prophets were right. He's arrested, he's beaten, and then the next class will tell us what happens.